What if everything you were taught about prayer was incomplete? What if the most powerful words Jesus ever spoke were never meant to be spoken in church? What if a single sentence, hidden for centuries, was dangerous enough to be buried in the desert and erased from Scripture not because it was false, but because it worked? And what if, as you are listening to this right now, something deep inside you already knows that? Because this story is not about belief. It is not about religion. It is about remembrance. And once you hear it, there is no going back. There are 3 prayers every Christian knows by heart. The Lord's Prayer, the prayer of confession, the prayer of salvation. They are spoken in churches, whispered beside hospital beds, repeated in moments of fear and hope. They ask for forgiveness. They ask for guidance. They ask for help from a God who feels distant, high above, separated from the one who is praying. But according to ancient texts the church chose not to include. Jesus taught a 4th prayer. Not publicly. Not to the crowds. Not to everyone. This prayer was never meant to be asked. It was meant to be declared. And that is precisely why it had to disappear. For centuries, Christianity has been built on a single assumption: that you are separate from the divine, that you were born broken, that you need an intermediary to reach God, a priest, a church, a system, a set of rules. But the earliest followers of Jesus understood something radically different. They believed his teachings had 2 layers. The outer layer was for the masses: stories, parables, moral lessons anyone could understand. Love your neighbor, forgive your enemy, be humble, be kind. But beneath that surface was an inner teaching, a current of knowledge so destabilizing that it threatened every hierarchy built on spiritual authority. Those teachings were not about worship. They were about awakening. And they were reserved only for those who were ready to hear them. In the Gospel of Thomas, a collection of sayings attributed directly to Jesus, he makes this distinction unmistakably clear. He tells his disciples that the kingdom is not coming in the way people expect. It is not somewhere you can point to. It is not above the clouds or behind temple walls. It is already inside you. This was not metaphor. It was instruction. The early Christians who followed this path were later labeled heretics, Gnostics, dangerous thinkers who believed salvation did not come from obedience, but from knowledge, not intellectual knowledge, but gnosis, direct knowing, the kind that happens in the body, the kind that rearranges your sense of self. According to these texts, the universe itself was not what people thought it was. Before time, before matter, before form, there was only the monad, pure, undivided consciousness, infinite awareness without name, without boundary, without opposite. From this source flowed emanations of light, giving rise to higher realms of being, dimensions of unity and harmony known as the pleroma, the fullness of divine existence. And you were there. Not your body, not your memories, not your identity as you know it now, but the essence of you, the awareness behind your eyes, the witness that has never aged. But something went wrong. One of the emanations, Sophia, wisdom itself, attempted to create without balance. From that incomplete act emerged a being that lacked full awareness of the source. The demiurge. He was not evil in the way we imagine monsters to be evil. He was ignorant, blind to the realms above him, unable to perceive the monad. And in that blindness, he looked at the world he formed and declared himself the highest God. I am God. There is no other beside me. Those words appear in the Old Testament, but the Gnostics read them very differently. To them, this was not the voice of the true source. It was the voice of a lesser creator, mistaking himself for the absolute. The demiurge shaped the material world, time, matter, flesh, but he could not create consciousness. That spark came from the monad alone. So when humanity emerged, carrying within it a fragment of divine awareness, the demiurge faced a problem. He could not destroy what he did not create. Instead, He built a system to contain it. He generated rulers, forces the Gnostics called archons. Their purpose was not worship, but management, control. They maintained a reality structured around fear, scarcity, guilt, and separation. Not by force, by illusion. They fed on human energy, on anxiety, on longing, on the endless feeling that something is missing. Every time you feel drained without explanation. Every time you wake up tired despite sleeping. Every time a quiet emptiness follows even your happiest moments. According to the Gnostics, that is not accidental. The world was designed as a loop. Live, suffer, hope, die, then return. When the body dies, the soul is drawn toward a light. Familiar faces appear. A sense of peace washes over you. Everything you were taught tells you this is salvation. But the ancient texts warned otherwise. They claimed this light was not the monad. It was the entrance back into the system. Memories erased, identity reset, inserted into another body, another lifetime, another cycle of forgetting. The wheel of reincarnation described in Buddhism. The illusion of Maya described in Hinduism. Different languages, same intuition. But the Gnostics went further. They believed there was a way out. And this is where Jesus enters the story in a way most people have never been told. He did not come to establish a religion. He came to wake the sleepers. To remind the divine sparks trapped in matter that they were not prisoners by nature. They were prisoners by forgetfulness. His miracles were not displays of power. They were demonstrations of what consciousness could do when it remembered itself. And his most dangerous teaching was not a parable. It was a declaration. A declaration so simple, so direct, that it bypassed ritual entirely. No sacrifice, no confession, no permission. Just recognition. This is why it could never be allowed to spread. By the 4th century, when church authorities gathered to decide which texts would shape Christianity, the decision was not about truth. It was about control. Anything that suggested humans carried divinity within themselves had to go. Anything that removed the need for priests, confession, hierarchy, and fear had to disappear. So the texts were banned. The teachers were silenced. And the 4th prayer was buried. Literally. In 1945, in the Egyptian desert near Nag Hammadi, a farmer unearthed a sealed jar containing manuscripts hidden for over 16 centuries. Texts that had survived only because someone, long ago, knew they were too dangerous to be destroyed. And inside them was the key the system never wanted you to find. Not a prayer asking God to come to you, but a prayer that revealed God was never separate from you at all. The discovery of those manuscripts did not shake the world the way it should have. There were no headlines announcing that the foundations of religion had cracked. No churches closed their doors. No institutions apologized. Instead, the texts were labeled historical curiosities, academic artifacts, interesting, but not important. That was not an accident. Because buried inside those writings was an idea so destabilizing that even reading it too quickly could cause you to miss its weight. Jesus did not teach people how to reach God. He taught them how to remember who they were. In the Gospel of Thomas, there is a moment when the disciples ask Jesus to show them the place where he is. They believe it is somewhere distant, somewhere holy, somewhere separate. Jesus responds in a way that unsettles everything. He tells them that there is light within a person of light, and it lights up the whole world. And if it does not shine, there is darkness. He does not point upward. He does not point forward in time. He points inward. This is the pattern repeated again and again in the suppressed teachings. The kingdom is not coming. The kingdom is not external. The kingdom is already present, but unseen, because people are looking in the wrong direction. The system thrives on that misdirection. Because the moment you believe the divine is outside of you, you become dependent. You begin asking instead of declaring. You kneel instead of remembering. You wait instead of awakening. The Gnostics believed this was the core deception of the demiurge and the archons. Separation. If you believe you are separate from the source, you can be controlled. If you believe you are unworthy, you can be managed. If you believe salvation is somewhere else, you will never stop seeking. And seeking generates energy. This is why the fourth prayer was so dangerous. It did not ask. It did not plead. It did not submit. It collapsed the illusion in a single sentence. But before that sentence could be spoken, something else had to happen. Recognition. The Gnostics were clear about this. Knowledge alone does nothing. Reading words on a page does not free anyone. Memorizing scripture does not unlock the door. Gnosis is not information. It is an event. It happens when something inside you remembers itself without effort. When a truth lands not in your thoughts, but in your nervous system, in your breath, in the space behind your eyes where awareness itself lives. That is why Jesus never taught this publicly. Most people were not ready. Not because they were unworthy, but because they were still identified with the prison, still convinced they were only bodies, only names, only stories. The fourth prayer only works when spoken from a very specific state of consciousness. A state beyond fear, beyond hope, beyond belief. A state of knowing. The words themselves are almost disappointingly simple. 4 words. 11 letters. So simple that the mind wants to reject them immediately, to dismiss them as naive, as symbolic, as metaphor. That rejection is not random. According to the Gnostics, the archons do not need to attack truth directly. They only need to make it seem trivial. If something looks too simple, the ego turns away. If it looks too easy, the conditioned mind says it cannot be real. Salvation must be hard. Awakening must take years. God must be distant. But truth rarely announces itself with fireworks. Sometimes it whispers. The fourth prayer does not begin with Our Father. It does not ask for forgiveness. It does not ask for protection or guidance. Because the moment you ask, you place yourself below. Asking confirms separation. And separation is the root of the illusion. Instead, this prayer is a declaration of identity. Not an affirmation you repeat hoping it will become true. A statement of what already is, spoken from recognition. The prayer is this: I am the monad. That is all. When spoken from the mind, they are empty words. When spoken from belief, they are just philosophy. When spoken from fear, they do nothing. But when spoken from remembrance, they shatter the structure of the prison. Because in that moment, you are no longer claiming connection to the source. You are claiming identity with it. This is what terrified the system. No priest can stand between you and yourself. No ritual can connect you to what you already are. No institution can sell salvation to someone who knows they were never separate. This is why the church labeled these teachings heresy. Not because they were false, but because they removed control. A person who knows they carry the divine spark cannot be ruled through guilt. A person who remembers their origin does not fear death the same way. A person who recognizes themselves as awareness itself is no longer harvestable in the same way. The archons feed on fear and forgetfulness. Recognition starves them. This is also why the practice matters more than the words. The Gnostics taught that before speaking the declaration, one must feel into the I am. Not your name. Not your personality. Not your history. But the simple fact of being aware. That awareness has been constant your entire life. It watched you as a child. It watched your joys and heartbreaks. It was present before every thought and will remain when thoughts fade. That awareness is not produced by the body. The body appears within it. When you rest there, something subtle begins to shift. The sense of being trapped behind the eyes loosens. Awareness expands beyond the skull, beyond the skin. And when that expansion is felt, not imagined, the words land differently. I am the monad. Not as ego. Not as superiority. Not as separation from others. But as recognition that the same awareness looking through your eyes looks through all eyes. A wave recognizing it is the ocean. This is why the practice was meant to be done in stillness. In privacy, without audience or performance, before sleep, when the defenses of the mind soften. The first time, the shift may be dramatic, or it may be quiet, or it may feel like nothing at all. That does not mean nothing happened. Decades of conditioning do not dissolve instantly. The prison was built layer by layer. It loosens the same way. But each time the declaration is spoken from recognition, something changes. Chains weaken. Loops lose their grip. Reality responds differently. Synchronicities increase. Conversations echo thoughts. People sense something without knowing why. Not because you are special, but because you are less hidden. The matrix of fear depends on you forgetting. Remembrance disrupts it. And this is where the story turns inward. Because if you are still listening, still following, still feeling that quiet pull in your chest, then something in you already recognizes this signal. Not intellectually, viscerally. The Gnostics believed this recognition could not be taught. It could only be triggered. The spark responds to its own frequency. Which raises a question the system never wants you to ask. What if you are not here to be saved? What if you are here to remember that you were never lost? There is a moment, usually late at night, when the world grows quiet enough for truth to surface. Not the truth you argue about. Not the truth you defend. But the truth that does not need explanation. This is the moment the fourth prayer was meant for. Not spoken in a crowd. Not spoken for approval. Spoken when no one is watching. Because remembrance does not perform. Tonight, when the noise of the day finally fades, you sit or lie down in a place where you will not be interrupted. The room does not matter. The posture does not matter. What matters is honesty, a willingness to stop pretending you are only what the world told you that you are. You do not try to empty your mind. You do not fight your thoughts. You let them slow on their own, like sediment settling in still water. And then you feel for the one thing that has never changed. The sense of being aware. Not what you are aware of, but the fact that you are aware at all. That awareness was present before every success and every failure. It was there before every role you learned to play. It has watched every version of you come and go. Sit there for a moment. Not thinking about it. Feeling it. Then something subtle happens. The boundary you thought existed between you and the world begins to soften. Awareness no longer feels trapped behind your face. It expands, quietly, without effort. The body becomes an experience inside awareness, not the container of it. This is the recognition the Gnostics spoke of. Not belief. Not imagination. Recognition. And from this place, the words change. They are no longer something you say. They are something you confirm. I am the monad. Not as a person claiming divinity, but as divinity recognizing itself as a person. There is no lightning bolt, no choir of angels, no dramatic vision required. Sometimes there is warmth in the chest. Sometimes pressure releases at the crown of the head. Sometimes there is only a deep, quiet certainty that does not ask for validation. And sometimes there is nothing at all. That is not failure. It is layers dissolving. The system you were born into trained you to expect transformation to look spectacular, to be loud, to be obvious, but real shifts often happen beneath the surface, rearranging foundations before anything visible changes. In the days that follow, you begin to notice small things, patterns you once ignored, moments of synchronicity that feel too precise to be random. A strange calm where anxiety used to live. The world does not suddenly become perfect. Life still happens. Challenges still appear, but your relationship to them changes. Fear no longer feels absolute. Death no longer feels final. Identity no longer feels fixed. You begin to sense what the Gnostics meant when they said the archons ruled through forgetfulness. Because when you remember, their grip weakens. The old triggers lose their power faster. Emotional loops resolve more quickly. The constant hunger for something more begins to quiet. Not because you found something new, but because you remembered something ancient. This is why the system works so hard to keep people distracted, busy, divided, afraid, because a person who remembers who they are cannot be easily controlled. They do not need permission to be whole. They do not need approval to be worthy. They do not need salvation from outside themselves. They move differently, speak differently, listen differently, and others can feel it. This is not about superiority. This is about responsibility. When Jesus spoke to those who had ears to hear, he was not creating an elite. He was activating a signal, a frequency of remembrance that spreads quietly, person to person, spark to spark. That is why this teaching survived, hidden in jars beneath desert sand. It did not need institutions to protect it. It only needed time. And now it has found you. Not because you are special, but because you are ready. The fourth prayer was never meant to replace the others. It was meant to complete the picture they could not show. It was meant to remind you that asking was never the final step. Declaration was, you were never meant to beg the source for connection. You were meant to recognize that connection never left. This is the meaning behind the words. I am the monad. Not an idea. Not a belief. A remembering. And remembrance changes everything. So tonight, speak the words, not as a ritual, not as a test. Speak them as a fact you are finally willing to admit to yourself. Then sit in silence. Let the mind relax. Let the body follow. Let awareness rest in itself. Do not chase experiences. Do not measure results. Do not rush. The door does not open outward. It opens inward. And once you see that, you understand the truth that frightened every system built on separation. You were never broken. You were never abandoned. You were never separate from the source you were taught to seek. You are not a human being trying to reach the divine. You are the divine, remembering what it feels like to be human. This is what was erased. This is what survived. This is what you were meant to hear. If you practice this tonight and feel the shift, share your experience in the comments. Your words may be the confirmation someone else needs to trust their own remembering. And if this message resonated with you, stay connected. More forgotten teachings are resurfacing, and more sleepers are waking up. The remembrance has already begun. Now it is your turn to speak it.